I don't know if anyone will ever see this. Camera light is dim, the battery almost gone, and my voice is already hoarse from the nights I've spent whispering to no one. Maybe this is just for me, some last confession, some anchor against the dark. But I keep recording because silence feels worse. Silence is too much like the world outside, broken, empty, hollowed out. I was never supposed to be the one telling this story. I wasn't brave enough, not determined enough, not the kind of journalist who clings to truth like a weapon. I was a failed reporter, cut from local TV after too many missed cues, too much drinking, too much of my own bitterness creeping into what was supposed to be clean delivery. They called me too emotional. They called me unreliable. Maybe they were right. And yet here I am, one of the last left to record the unraveling of an entire nation. It didn't happen all at once. People will say it did. They'll want to condense it into a single spark, a match that lit the whole dry field on fire. But it wasn't like that. It was slower, meaner, a creeping frost that split the country apart one line at a time, until neighbors couldn't look at each other without suspicion, until brothers and sisters measured loyalty by maps. Redistricting, that was the word they used. Cold, technical, bureaucratic. They cut and carved states like butcher's meat, each party fighting to redraw lines in their own favor, each lawsuit dragging the courts deeper into partisan sludge. And when the Supreme Court broke, when it failed to give a ruling anyone would accept, the states themselves decided to redraw their own borders. That's when the riots started. That's when people like me, people already floating between jobs and family feuds, felt the ground slip out from under us. My family, God, I don't even know how to start with them. My father was a union man, old-school Democrat who trusted labor more than he trusted the government. My brother, Evan, went the other way, talk radio, guns, militia marches through town squares. Thanksgiving dinners became trenches, each side armed with statistics and insults. I used to try to mediate, reporter instincts maybe, but all it did was make both of them hate me for not choosing. "You're weak," Evan told me once. "You're part of the problem, sitting on the fence." He said it like a curse. My father just looked disappointed, like I'd wasted something important. When the states started threatening each other over district lines, Ohio refusing federal maps, Texas carving its own, California announcing it wouldn't recognize neighboring tallies, it felt surreal. Like watching a play where the actors forgot their lines and just started fighting on stage. First, we thought it would be settled in court. Then we thought maybe the president would hold it together. But speeches turned into threats, threats turned into embargoes, and embargoes turned into militias crossing borders to protect democracy. I remember the first time I saw a firefight on American soil. Not a school shooting, not a lone gunman, an actual firefight between two groups of men, each claiming they were defending the Constitution. It was in Cincinnati, a border city caught between maps. One side flew Ohio's flag, the other carried banners they'd stitched together overnight, red stripes reworked to show some imagined free Midwest republic. I had my old camera with me, half drunk on cheap vodka, thinking maybe if I caught it on film someone would pay me again for my work. But no one wanted to buy it. No network wanted to show American citizens gunning each other down over district lines. Too messy. Too dangerous. Too real. That footage still lives on a corrupted drive somewhere. I tell myself I'll recover it someday, but I know I won't. The worst part wasn't the violence. It was how fast people chose sides. Friends I'd grown up with in school, women I used to drink with at the bar, cousins who came to my wedding, all of them fell like dominoes. "You're either with us or against us," they said. Against what? For what? It didn't matter, nuance was gone. I lost more than my job, I lost everyone who could stomach me. I was too blue for some, too red for others, and by the end I was just nothing. Just a woman talking into a camera no one would ever watch. I should have left earlier, should have packed up when the highways were still open, when you could still drive south without hitting checkpoints or west without militias stopping you for proof of loyalty. But I kept thinking it would settle. That's the reporter in me, the failed one. Always believing the story might have a neat ending, that the chaos might be contained. Instead, I stayed. I watched my city break apart like rotten wood. First the power grid started cutting out, each state fighting over which region had priority. Then the grocery stores closed, supplies were hijacked by militias claiming they needed it for their side. I lost count of how many nights I spent with nothing but stale bread and warm water. And when people went hungry long enough, they stopped pretending to care about politics. They just wanted food and they would kill for it. I tried to keep track of the bigger events to keep my reports balanced, but every time I spoke into the camera it was my own grief that leaked out instead. The redistricting wars, they're calling it now. But that phrase feels too clean. It wasn't just wars. It was collapse. I remember my mother crying when Evan stormed out of the house for the last time, rifle slung over his back, shouting that he'd never return until the Unionists were gone. I remember my father, coughing through his illness, muttering that his own son had betrayed the bloodline. And I remember myself standing there with my useless notepad, trying to write it down like it mattered. The next week, my father was dead. Not from bullets, not from fire, just sickness. He couldn't get his medicine. Supply lines were severed, and what little remained cost more than we could afford. He died angry, bitter, spitting words I'll never forget. You should have done something. You should have been better. I wasn't better. I was nothing. I buried him in the backyard because the cemeteries were full. My mother stopped speaking to me after that. She said I was cursed, that everything I touched rotted. I don't think she even believed it, but grief makes people cruel. She left a month later, walking south with a caravan of refugees. I never saw her again. Now it's just me. Me, the camera, and the sound of distant gunfire that never really stops. I thought maybe after my mother left that I would feel lighter. Alone, yes, but lighter, like I didn't have to carry her grief alongside mine. But silence weighs heavier than arguments, and the house became unbearable. I started recording more, not because I believed anyone would watch, but because I couldn't stand the sound of my own breathing as the only proof I was still alive. Outside, the neighborhood emptied street by street. Houses that once had Christmas lights and barbecue smoke now sat hollow, their windows shattered, their yards trampled into mud. Some left willingly, others were driven out, and some, I still try not to think about the ones who didn't leave at all, the ones whose doors stayed shut even as the smell told the truth. There were days when the city felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for someone to declare it stable again, to call off the checkpoints and the gunfire. Then there were nights when it felt like Hell's Gates had opened, when entire blocks burned just because two militias crossed paths near a gas station. I filmed some of it, but I stopped trying to edit or organize. The files piled up in corrupted drives, scattered memory cards, half-broken hard disks. Even if someone found them someday, they'd never make sense of the mess. Maybe that's fitting. The country itself stopped making sense a long time ago. First real collapse came when Washington fractured. President tried to hold on to legitimacy, but when half the governors declared they wouldn't recognize his emergency powers, the rest followed. Soon there were 3 different federal governments, each claiming the Constitution backed them. They issued competing laws, competing taxes, even competing military orders. Soldiers deserted rather than choose which orders to obey. Some went home to protect their families, others sold their rifles to whichever side paid them first. I heard the broadcasts, each faction claiming they were the true saviors of America. They all used the same words: freedom, unity, democracy. But every time those words came out of the speakers, another bridge blew up, another family was divided, another map was drawn with new lines and blood. I tried calling my old friends then, the ones I thought might still talk to me, even just for comfort. One Sarah answered once. She sounded tired, worn down, her voice breaking as she told me she couldn't talk long. Her husband had joined one of the district defense units, and she had to move with them across the river. I told her I missed her and she cried, but then the line went dead. I never reached her again. Another Lena didn't even pick up. Weeks later, I heard her voice in a militia broadcast, chanting slogans about purging traitors. I shut the radio off before I could listen too long. The loneliness was worse than hunger. Hunger you can dull, you can survive with stale bread and boiled weeds if you're desperate. But loneliness carves holes inside you that never fill. I started talking to the camera more like it was a person, giving it a name, calling it my witness. "You're the only one left," I'd whisper. "The only one who won't leave me." It's pathetic, I know. But when you've lost everyone else, even a blinking red light feels like a friend. The militias grew bolder as the federal vacuum widened. First, they fought each other over districts and maps, shouting about which neighborhoods belonged to which side. Then they stopped bothering with explanations. They just wanted control, wanted fuel, food, and people who would obey. Some wore uniforms, some didn't. It didn't matter. If they knocked on your door, you gave them what they wanted or you disappeared. I tried to stay invisible. Curtains closed, lights dim, no smoke from the chimney. I scavenged at night, moving like a shadow, praying no one saw me. Sometimes I found canned goods in abandoned houses. Sometimes I found bodies. The worst was when I found both, because then I had to choose between hunger and the risk of carrying death home with me. One night I thought I saw Evan. My brother died. I was cutting through an alley, carrying a bag of stale crackers when I spotted a patrol moving down the street. One of them had his walk, his way of holding the rifle low but ready. I froze, heart hammering, wondering if I should call out. But then I heard him laugh, loud, harsh, cruel, and realized it wasn't the laugh I remembered. It wasn't Evan, not anymore. Even if it had been, I don't think he would have recognized me as his sister. I went home and cried until my throat was raw. The cities started sealing themselves off, building walls of scrap metal, buses, anything they could find. Each one claimed to be a safe zone, but they were just cages. Inside, you were at the mercy of whoever controlled the gates. Inside, you were a ghost, unwanted, unprotected. I stayed outside, half by choice, half by cowardice. I couldn't stomach being locked behind someone else's guns. Real news vanished. The old networks collapsed when their headquarters were seized or destroyed. Local stations were overrun. What remained were pirate signals, amateur broadcasts full of rumors and lies. Some said California had declared itself a new country, others swore Texas had annexed Oklahoma. I didn't know what to believe. I only knew that no one was telling the truth anymore, and maybe no one could. My own work became less about facts and more about survival. I didn't document battles so much as I documented decay, streets crumbling, hospitals abandoned, families fleeing with everything they could carry. I filmed myself too, growing thinner, more hollow, my eyes ringed with shadows. I wanted there to be proof, at least that one voice saw it clearly. That even if I failed as a reporter, I didn't fail as a witness. The nights grew louder. Artillery in the distance, screams closer by. I started sleeping in the basement, clutching my camera like a weapon. Sometimes I imagined I was talking to my father again, telling him all the things I should have said before he died. Other times I imagined Evan walking through the door, dropping his rifle, saying he'd had enough. But those were dreams, not memories. The reality was ash and silence. When winter came, I nearly died. Cold was sharper than any bullet, creeping through the cracks in the walls. I burned furniture for heat, tore apart books for kindling. I thought about burning my old notes too, but I couldn't bring myself to. They were useless, yes, but they were the last pieces of the woman I used to be. The woman who thought words could matter. I filmed myself one night, wrapped in blankets, teeth chattering, and I said into the lens, "This is the United States of America. This is what we've become. Not a beacon, not a leader, just fragments, just starving souls waiting to freeze." I don't know why I said it, maybe because saying it out loud made it real, and if it was real, then maybe my suffering wasn't meaningless. But meaning is a luxury we lost long ago. There were days I forgot what year it was. Days when the clock stopped meaning anything, when I only measured time by the sounds outside, gunfire at dawn, silence at noon, another skirmish at dusk. Sometimes I'd wake to explosions in the distance and wonder if the sun was even rising anymore, or if it was all just fire. I stopped counting weeks after the banks collapsed. Not just closed, collapsed, their servers wiped, their branches burned, their vaults emptied by whichever faction got there first. People carried bundles of useless paper dollars like trash, trading them for bread until even the desperate refused. After that, barter became the only language. A can of beans for a blanket. A knife for antibiotics. And if you had nothing to trade, you begged. Or you stole. Or you starved. I had nothing worth stealing, that was my only protection. Thin, hungry, alone, I was just another shadow in the ruins. Once a man knocked on my door. He was young, maybe 20, face dirty, eyes wild. He begged for food, said he hadn't eaten in 3 days. I didn't believe him. You can't tell anymore. Everyone lies when they're hungry. I wanted to help, but all I had was half a stale loaf and some dried beans. If I gave it to him, I'd have nothing. If I kept it, I'd feel his face haunting me. I froze, bread in one hand, camera in the other, whispering into the lens as if it would decide for me. When I turned back, he was gone. I don't know if he lived or died. I don't know which would make me guiltier. By then, the maps had stopped being redrawn with ink. They were drawn with blood. Ohio fractured into 3 zones, each controlled by different militias. Kentucky shut its borders, barricading bridges and shooting anyone who tried to cross. Indiana was a battlefield, burned black from one end to the other. The news, when it reached me, was always delayed, always unreliable, but I pieced it together from scraps. America wasn't one nation anymore. It was dozens of little tyrannies, each convinced they were the real savior. I started dreaming of escape. South, maybe, or west, anywhere the fighting wasn't as thick. But every time I thought about leaving, I saw my father's grave in the yard, the shallow dirt still frozen in places. I couldn't abandon him. Couldn't abandon the only anchor I had left. And then there was the truth. I was afraid. Afraid of the roads, afraid of checkpoints, afraid of seeing Evan's face across a rifle barrel. Moving meant risking discovery, and discovery meant death. So I stayed, and I kept talking. The loneliness rotted me from the inside. I caught myself speaking to the empty air, inventing conversations with people I'd lost. Sometimes it was my father, lecturing me in that gravel voice about responsibility. Sometimes it was my mother, soft but cutting, asking why I couldn't ever hold a family together. Most often it was Evan. In my mind, he was still the boy who threw rocks at the river with me, who walked me home from school when other kids called me names. But even in those imagined conversations, he left me in the end. He always walked away. The militias grew crueler as winter dragged on. They began public trials in the street, mock trials really with no defense, no chance. Accusations of treason, of sabotage, of loyalty to the wrong district. The condemned were beaten, sometimes shot, sometimes hung from lampposts. I stopped going out in the daytime. It was safer in the shadows. Safer to be invisible. One night I heard screams from the house 2 doors down. A family lived there, 2 parents, 3 children. I had seen them scavenging before, their faces gaunt but determined. I didn't look when the screams came. Didn't look when the gunfire followed. But I smelled the fire as their house burned, and I knew none of them walked out alive. I filmed the smoke curling into the night sky and whispered into the camera, "This is America." The irony is that I'd always wanted to tell a story big enough to matter. I'd always dreamed of being a reporter who caught the moment history shifted. But when it finally came, when history shattered into shards sharp enough to bleed the world dry, I was nothing but a failed woman in a ruined house, whispering to a dying camera. I tried to reach Sarah again in the spring. I'd found an old radio, managed to repair it enough to catch faint signals. One night I heard her name, her militia broadcast was still running. They spoke of victories across the river, of traitors cleansed. Her voice was different now, hard, metallic. I called out, using the shortwave, begging her to remember me. No answer. Maybe she didn't hear. Maybe she did and chose silence. I can't blame her. If I were her, I wouldn't want to remember me either. By the time the thaw came, the dead outnumbered the living. The rivers swelled with runoff, carrying debris and corpses alike. Bridges collapsed, towns emptied, highways cracked from neglect. America was unrecognizable, a patchwork of ruins, a graveyard of ideals. And yet I kept recording, not because I thought anyone would see it, but because not recording felt like surrender. Like admitting that none of it mattered. I told the camera about my father's hands, rough and scarred from years of work. I told it about my mother's laughter, rare but beautiful when it came. I told it about Evan, before the slogans and the rifles, when he was just a boy who wanted to fish with me at the river. I told it about Sarah, about Lena, about the faces that once filled my life before politics tore us apart. Sometimes I'd replay the footage. Watch my own face crumple, watch my lips tremble. Felt like I was watching a stranger die slowly, piece by piece. That stranger is me. I think the hardest truth is this: the Civil War didn't just break the country. Broke me long before the first bullet flew. I was already fractured between family, between loyalty, between belief and doubt. The war just finished the job. I don't know how much longer I can last here. The food is gone again, and the noises outside are closer every night. I tell myself I'll leave, that I'll follow the refugees south, maybe find my mother if she still breathes. But I know I won't. I'll stay because I can't imagine leaving my father's grave. Because I can't imagine a world where I still belong anywhere. If anyone ever finds this, if anyone ever hears my voice, know this: the United States didn't fall because of lines on a map. Fell because those lines mattered more to us than the people standing on them. Fell because we forgot how to be human together. And once you forget that, no flag, no speech, no border can save you. I'm so tired. The thaw gave way to mud, and the mud gave way to graves. Every field, every empty lot, every patch of soft earth became a place for the dead. People stopped marking them after a while. Too many too fast. Wooden crosses rotted before the names could be carved. Families buried their own and moved on if they were lucky enough to move on at all. The unlucky ones just left bodies where they fell, faces blank to the sky. I told myself I would never get used to the smell, but I did. Or maybe my body just shut down that part of me, the part that gagged and cried and shook. After months of smoke and rot, you stop noticing. It's just another layer of the air, another reminder that life is fragile and cheap. I kept recording because I couldn't stop. Even as the tapes ran out, even as the batteries drained, I scavenged old stores and pawn shops, anything with electronics. Most of it was ruined or stripped, but sometimes I got lucky. A spare battery here, a memory card there. Became my currency. Where others hoarded bullets, I hoarded fragments of voice and image. But what was I recording anymore? Not news, not history. Just decay. Just the slow disintegration of everything we thought was permanent. I tried to narrate the big events, the shifts in power, but each week the story contradicted itself. One signal claimed that New York had declared independence, another swore New York had burned. One said the president was still alive in a hidden bunker, another said he'd been executed on live television. None of it mattered. What mattered was the hunger, the fear, the silence of streets that once carried laughter and music. Sometimes I walked the city with my camera, showing the ruins to no one. I filmed graffiti on crumbling walls, slogans of loyalty, threats of vengeance, desperate prayers. I filmed a church that had become a barracks, its stained glass shattered, its pews turned into firewood. I filmed children digging through trash, their eyes older than mine. Once I filmed myself standing in front of the mirror. My hair was falling out from malnutrition, my skin pale and cracked. I didn't look like me anymore. I looked like the kind of ghost people scare their children with. I stared into the lens and whispered, "Remember me." Even if no one else does. I don't know who I was talking to. Evan haunted me more with every passing day. I never saw him again, not clearly, but I felt him everywhere. In the militia's boots pounding down the street. In the slogans shouted from trucks. In the cruelty of young men who believed they were patriots. I don't know if he lived or died, and I don't know which answer I fear more. If he died, it means I'll never get to tell him I'm sorry. If he lived, it means he's one of them now, too far gone to come back. The radio brought whispers of larger battles. Texas and California clashing over control of fuel routes. Florida cut off by flooding and blockades. Washington, D.C. a smoking crater, fought over so many times that no one wanted it anymore. Each region built its own government, its own flags, its own myths. America fractured into a dozen little nations, none willing to admit they'd killed the original. I thought about running south again. Rumors said there were camps there, places where food still reached, where communities tried to rebuild. But every caravan that passed looked like a death march, gaunt faces, desperate eyes, bodies collapsing in the dirt. I stayed cowardice again, or loyalty to a grave that no one else remembered. One night I woke to footsteps outside. Careful, deliberate, I held my breath, clutching the camera like it was a weapon. A shadow passed the window, paused, then moved on. I never saw their face. Maybe they saw me. Maybe they didn't. The next morning I found a note under the door. No words, just a drawing, a cracked flag, stars falling out of place. I burned it. The loneliness sharpened into madness. I began talking to the camera like it was my brother. Like it could answer me. "Evan," I'd say, staring into the glass, "do you remember when we used to fish at the river? Do you remember when Dad told us stories about strikes and unions? Do you remember before you hated me?" No answer, of course. Just my own voice echoing back. I began seeing people who weren't there. My mother, walking through the door with her soft smile. My father, standing by the window with his coughing fits. Sarah, laughing over coffee like the war never touched her. I knew they weren't real, but sometimes I spoke to them anyway. Better hallucinations than silence. The city shrank further. Neighborhoods walled themselves in, barricading with rusted cars and broken fences. Each block became its own kingdom, suspicious of anyone crossing lines. Gunfire crackled nightly, fires burned unchecked. The skyline, once proud, was now a jagged mouth missing too many teeth. And still I kept recording. I don't know why. Habit, maybe. Fear of being forgotten. A need to prove I existed, that I wasn't just another unmarked grave. Sometimes when I whispered into the lens, I imagined someone in the far future watching me. A child, maybe, born after all this, curious about how the old world died. I imagined them sitting in a rebuilt classroom, teachers explaining the redistricting wars while my face flickered on the wall. "This was a witness," they'd say. This was someone who saw it firsthand. The thought kept me alive longer than food. But each day the world shrank. Each day the noise outside grew closer. Each day I wondered if tomorrow would be the one when I stopped talking, when I stopped being. The hardest part isn't hunger. It isn't fear. It isn't even the loneliness. The hardest part is knowing that we did this to ourselves. The days blur. Sometimes I wake and the light through the cracks in the boards feels like it belongs to another planet. Too bright. Too alien. I close my eyes and pretend it isn't morning, pretend time hasn't moved forward at all. But the hunger always pulls me back. Hunger is louder than any dream. I ration crumbs now, not meals, not food, crumbs. Small enough to stick in my teeth, to fool my stomach into silence for an hour. I drink water from a rusted bucket that catches the leaks in the roof. Taste is metallic, sometimes foul, but it keeps me breathing. I watch myself shrink in the mirror, though I don't look often. My cheeks hollowed, eyes sunken, skin stretched thin like parchment. I don't look like the woman who once stood in front of cameras, fumbling through news scripts. I don't look like a daughter or a sister. I don't look like anyone worth remembering. But the camera remembers. I tell it stories. Some true, some invented. I tell it about summers at the lake, about the time Evan pushed me into the water and laughed as I screamed. I tell it about Mom's pies cooling on the windowsill, the smell drifting out into the street. I tell it about Dad's lectures on justice, how he believed fairness was something you had to fight for. And then I tell it lies that Evan came home. That Mom sent word from the south. That Dad is buried in a place where the grass grows tall and green. Lies taste sweeter than crumbs. The city is dying louder now that I hear trucks rumble through the streets at night, men shouting, doors breaking. Sometimes I hear children crying. Sometimes I hear nothing after that. I stay silent, hidden, invisible. I don't move, don't breathe until the sounds fade. I saw the sky burn last week. To the west, orange and red clouds billowed, too wide to be just one building. Something big had gone. I filmed it, my voice trembling as I whispered, "Another city is gone." I don't even know which one it was. The names don't matter anymore. Only the fire does. The radio brings whispers of alliances forming, breaking, reforming. Regions swallowing smaller regions, warlords declaring themselves presidents. No one talks about the United States anymore. That word is gone. Buried with the dead. Sometimes I think about leaving. Walking south, west, anywhere. But every time I picture it, I see Evan's ghost on the roads, rifle in hand, waiting for me. I see my father's grave, lonely in the backyard, untended. I see myself falling in a ditch, nameless, forgotten. I stay. I found a notebook in the rubble of a school. Torn pages, half burned. I write in it sometimes when the batteries fail. The words are crooked, faint. I don't know if anyone will read them, but at least the paper listens. One night I dreamed of Sarah. She was standing in my kitchen, smiling, her hair the way it used to be before the war. She told me I was forgiven. I asked for what, she didn't answer. I woke up crying, my chest heavy with something I couldn't name. The militias hang bodies now, public displays, warnings to anyone who questions them. I filmed one once, a man strung from a lamppost, his sign reading "Traitor." His eyes were open, staring straight into the camera. I haven't watched that footage since. I wonder sometimes if this is all my fault. Not the war, not all of it, but the way it ended here. Maybe if I had been stronger, louder, braver. Maybe if I had held my family together. Maybe if I hadn't failed as a reporter, I could have told the truth when it mattered. Maybe someone would have listened. Maybe things would be different. But the truth is, no one listened to anyone. That's why we burned. I speak to the camera as though it's God. I confess to it. My anger. My cowardice. My envy of those who died quickly without watching the slow decay. I tell it my sins and I wait for forgiveness that never comes. The nights are the worst. Every creak in the walls feels like footsteps. Every gust of wind feels like breath on my neck. I clutch the camera and whisper into the lens, "If they come for me, remember me. Please remember me." Sometimes I catch myself smiling when I talk. Not because I'm happy, but because I've forgotten what real faces look like. I imagine the camera is smiling back. The city is emptier every week. Whole blocks abandoned, buildings collapsed. The weeds are winning. Nature takes back what war forgets. I filmed a tree growing through the roof of a burned-out car. It was the most beautiful thing I've seen in months. I wanted to touch it, but I was afraid I'd break it. There are whispers of plagues now. Disease spreading in the refugee camps, carried by hunger and filth. Some say it's worse than the war. Some say it's the war's natural end. I wonder if my mother is still alive. I wonder if she curses my name the way she did before she left. I'll never know. Evan is the ghost who won't leave me. In my mind, I replay our last argument. His voice sharp, mine trembling. Him shouting that I was weak, me begging him not to go. Every night I hear it again. Every night I imagine answering differently. Every night I fail again. Country is gone. That much I know. The lines on the map became lines in the dirt, and now the dirt is all that's left. We fought over districts, over numbers, over power that meant nothing when the lights went out. And in the end, we killed the only thing that held us together. Keep talking because silence feels like death. But maybe death is kinder than this. I don't know how long it's been since I've seen another living face. Weeks, maybe months. The days collapse into each other, indistinguishable. I mark time now by the flicker of the camera light, by the battery dying, by the cold returning, leaving, returning again. The world outside has no seasons anymore. Just ash. The silence isn't pure. It's punctured. Distant gunshots, muffled screams, the low rumble of trucks that come and go like storms. But in between there is nothing. Nothing but my breath and the scratching of rats in the walls. Sometimes when the silence grows too thick, I tap the lens and whisper, still there, as though it could leave me too. I dream more now. Dreams that feel real, sharper than waking life. Evan walking through the door, younger, his face free of anger. My mother setting a plate on the table, smiling at me with forgiveness she never gave in life. My father's hand on my shoulder, heavy, steady, telling me he was proud. I wake with tears and the house is empty again. The food is gone again. I chew paper sometimes just to trick my mouth. The notebook I found is thinner now, its pages torn out one by one. Words I wrote have become ash in my teeth. I wonder if anyone has ever eaten their own story before. I filmed myself doing it once. Ripping a page, folding it, chewing slowly. My face hollow, my eyes wide. I whispered into the camera, "This is America now." I don't know if I meant the act or the emptiness behind it. The city has stopped screaming. That's worse than the noise. Noise meant life, meant struggle, meant something happening. The silence now feels like the end. Blocks are abandoned, buildings caved in. Even the militias don't march as often. Perhaps they've killed enough, or perhaps they've moved on to richer prey. I scavenged the church again. The one turned to barracks. It's emptier now, pews gone, floors black with soot. On the altar I found a child's drawing, half-burned. Crayons had sketched a sun and a house, stick figures holding hands. I cried until I couldn't breathe. I kept the drawing. Sits next to the camera now, the only color left in this place. I tell the lens stories about those stick figures inventing their lives. A family untouched by war, a child who grows up happy, a mother who never walks away, a brother who never leaves. Lies again, but they feel like medicine. Sometimes I wonder if I've already died. This is some purgatory, some endless waiting room where I speak to machines instead of angels. Maybe that's all heaven and hell ever were, memories replayed until you rot. I listen to the radio less now. The voices are crueler, more desperate. They shout about victories that sound like massacres, about unity that sounds like chains. Once I heard someone claim that the war was over, that peace had been declared under a new banner. But the very next station screamed about fresh battles, about cities falling. Peace is just another lie to keep people listening. The batteries are harder to find. I dig through houses, pockets of the dead, ruins of shops. Most are corroded, leaking, useless. Sometimes I find one that holds a charge, just enough to keep the red light blinking for a few more hours. I measure my life by that light now. When it goes dark, I will too. I tried to write a letter to Evan. Just words on paper, as if he might read them someday. "I'm sorry," I wrote. "I should have chosen. I should have stood with you or against you instead of standing nowhere." But I tore it up before I finished. He wouldn't read it. He wouldn't care. Till I feel him everywhere. I in the boots I hear on the pavement, in the slogans painted on walls, in the rage that hangs over the ruins like smoke. I wonder if he survived. I wonder if he still hates me. I wonder if hate is the only thing that's kept him alive this long. I whisper into the camera, "I forgive you," though he'll never hear it. My father's grave is sinking, the soil is wet, the wood warped. I kneel there sometimes, press my hands into the dirt, whisper apologies. He doesn't answer. Maybe he never did, even when he was alive. The weather has turned again. Cold winds, sharper now. Winter is coming back, and I don't think I'll survive it. Last year I had scraps to burn. This year nothing, the walls are bare, the floor is stripped. I look at the furniture and think of fire, but then I look at the camera and think of memory. One must go before the other. I'm tired of remembering. And yet I keep speaking. 'Cause silence is death, because if I stop it means none of this mattered. 'Cause maybe, just maybe, someone will find these tapes, these fragments, these confessions. Maybe a child in a classroom, maybe a historian in some rebuilt city. Maybe no one. But still I speak. The world outside is gone, the United States is gone. My family is gone and my friends are gone. All that's left is me, a failed reporter, a failed daughter, a failed sister, whispering into a dying lens. If you are listening, if you are watching, know this: we killed ourselves long before the first bullet. We chose sides instead of each other. We carved maps instead of mercy. We forgot what it meant to share a table, to forgive, to love. And once you forget that, there's no coming back. I'm so cold. Cold has seeped into the walls. Creaks at night, louder than footsteps, like the house itself is shivering. I wrap myself in rags, blankets, coats, anything I can find, but still my fingers stiffen, still my lips crack. I film them sometimes, hold my hands up to the lens, bones pressing through skin. I whisper, this is what hunger looks like. This is what forgetting looks like. The batteries die faster now, each one gives me only an hour, 2 at most. I've started rationing my voice the way I ration crumbs. I speak in fragments, broken sentences, half thoughts. I tell myself I'll save enough for one last confession, one last story, but I can't stop talking. The silence presses too hard. I went outside 2 nights ago. The city was still. Too still. Snow covered the ruins, softening edges, hiding scars. For a moment it looked almost beautiful, like the world was clean again. But then I saw the bodies under the snow, frozen shapes curled against walls, faces locked in terror. Beauty is just a mask for rot. I filmed the street. My voice shook as I said, this was a city once. This was home. I found a body near the church. A young man, rifle still in his hands, eyes open to the sky. His skin was pale, lips blue. I stared at him for a long time. His jawline was sharp like Evan's. His hands rough, scarred like Dad's. For a moment I thought it was both of them, collapsed into one, waiting for me to forgive them. I reached out, touched his cheek. Cold. Stone. Nothing. I wanted to bury him, but the ground was too hard. So I covered him with snow instead. A white grave. Silent. The radio barely works now, just static, broken by the occasional burst of a voice. Shouts about victory, about unity, about God's judgment. Lies, all of it. I turn the dial slowly, listening for truth, but there is none. Only noise, only ghosts. I think the war is over, not because anyone won, but because there is no one left to fight. Empty cities, burned fields, starved bodies. A war can't survive without people. And we killed all of ours. I dreamed of Sarah again. She was sitting across from me at the table, her hands folded. She said, "You're not forgotten." Her lips moved, but her voice wasn't hers, it was mine, echoing back. I woke screaming, my throat raw. I whisper into the camera now, "Don't forget me." Camera is my only witness. My only friend. The red light is my sun, my moon, my God. When it blinks, I am alive. When it dies, I am nothing. I talk to it like a child. Are you hungry too? Do you want me to feed you stories? Do you want me to keep breathing for you? I laugh sometimes, a cracked, broken laugh. The sound startles me. I don't remember the last time I laughed. I found one last can of beans. Expired, dented, but edible. I cried as I ate it, the taste heavy, real. I filmed every bite. This is a feast, I whispered. This is America's feast. But now it is gone, and there is nothing left. I think of my mother often, wonder if she made it south, if she found safety, if she curses my name as she cursed it the day she left. I wonder if she lies in a ditch instead, her body unmarked, her face forgotten. I will never know. I think of Evan every night, his voice in my ear, sharp, angry. His footsteps pounding away. Sometimes in the dark I whisper, "Come home," as if he could hear me across death. As if he would listen. I think of my father most of all. His grave in the yard, sinking, forgotten. The soil cracking. The wood rotting. I want to lie down beside him. I want to tell him I'm sorry. I want him to say I did enough. But the grave is silent. The batteries are nearly gone. I have one left, its charge faint. I've saved it for this. My last entry.my last words. My last attempt to matter. I set the camera in front of me. My face is a skull, my eyes hollow. I stare into the lens and say, this is the end. Not just for me, but for all of us. The United States is gone, the people are gone. The maps are ash. The flags are rags. We killed each other for lines, for power, for pride. We forgot each other, we forgot what mattered. And now this is what's left. Me. A failed reporter. A failed daughter, a failed sister. Whispering into a machine that will die with me. But if you find this, if anyone finds this, remember. Remember that we were human once. That we laughed, that we loved, that we sat at tables and shared food, that we held each other in the dark. Remember that we weren't always this. Please remember me. I reach for the drawing from the church, the child's son, the stick figures. I hold it up to the camera and my hand shakes. This is what we should have been, I whisper. Not soldiers. Not traitors. Not enemies. Just this. Just family. The battery light flickers. Once. Twice. I lean closer. My lips brush the lens. My last breath fogs the glass. Goodbye. The red light dies. And so do I.